Recently, I took the plunge, joined the brethren of Apple and bought an iPad. This has been a long time coming. The iPad, icon of all that's cool in this tech world of ours, is going to expand my creativity. Guaranteed. It's going to enable me, my tech-wise son assures me, to create and seamlessly post video podcasts online to YouTube and Facebook. The answer to my prayers, I think. Fast-track storytelling. The saviour of the disorganised and the aged. Dad, it's your next logical step. I trust him, though. He should know, because as an only child he was heavily exposed to my stories, at least those fit for publishing. Those that are not are also coming along now, finally. And with his precociously good memory, he remembers a lot of my revealed life. You're a storyteller, Dad. Hey, I am a singer too, and that's what you should be doing. Inferred. Before you die. That's what I am doing, I plead. I'm writing stories and singing songs and sending recordings via WhatsApp and Messenger and all that stuff all over the world. I add proudly, and I have an audience of at least 50. He is too polite, too diplomatic, to point out the multiple millions of views he gets on his videos on Facebook and YouTube. He mostly makes his living in the online arena. But, Dad, for less effort, less time, there you have it again, time running out, death, you could have a large, appreciative audience. I know you had problems before with YouTube. That's where the iPad would come in. I can show you how to easily make video docs and podcasts. It's not nearly as difficult as it was. Use what our technology offers. Enjoy it. And as an added incentive, he threw in that I could avail of a family discount. My daughter-in-law is an Apple remote worker. The real clincher, however, was immortality. He suggested that a presence on YouTube, the ultimate storage device, potentially makes one immortal. Now, that's heady stuff to an older citizen with a heart condition and in the 8th decade of his life. That did it. This will speed up my storytelling, I thought. This will get them all done before. So, let the games commence. But not quite yet. Immortality, methinks, might wait a while. I'm a gardener too, and a broken tractor and unbroken soil need my ministrations as well. I also welcome the opportunity to reflect. The pace and complexity of change needs to be geared into my world. My world, after all, extends, patently in agricultural practices, from the Iron Age, scything, spading and hand-hoeing, to the atomic, computer, information, whatever age. And I have a cultural life also, modest though it may be. That has to be nurtured as well. So, cogent as my son was, this leathery old Luddite, clutching his battered, ages-old PC laptop, might not have been persuaded, forking out the best part of €1,000 if he hadn't been well seduced and softened up beforehand. Then, for me, everything changed. An iPad solved a pivotal problem in my life. I decided I had to have one on that very same day. To explain, stage fright is my special curse. It goes back to the year dot. Even though I didn't particularly need to overcome it, I wasn't a professional actor or public speaker, it caused me an undue amount of grief. I was well known, notorious even, for talking, and I thought it would be easy to cross over from social to public speaking. But the few times I did have a go, the results were just disastrous. I dammed up. My mind went blank. I got cold sweats. I trembled. I even ran away. I wrote a story about it some time ago. It harrowed up the old fears, but it was also cathartic and, I thought, educative. I took a lesson from it. I determined not to chance making a fool of myself in public again. But some of us never learn. I have a fatal attraction to risking my sanity on the boards or at the podium, and so. This time it began gradually enough. I met, we'll call her Galliena. She is a writer and also had a background in theatre direction. She grew up in East Germany and spoke, among other languages, Russian. She had a particular infatuation with Dostoevsky. She asked me to help her with her English. Early in our friendship, she confided an obsession to me. She wanted to put on a performance in English of an excerpt from Dostoevsky's novel The Brothers Karamazov. The piece was the long poem or soliloquy, The Grand Inquisitor. She didn't need a grand venue for it, nor stars to act in it. Not that any would have been available for a zero-finance production. It seemed at the time to be enough for her that it just got written. And that suited me. Galliena wanted a collaborator for her project, and I, ego aroused by this time, offered myself. No big deal, really. This was well within my bailiwick. I could write a bit, and I could safely, cowardly, remain at the edge of the limelight. She and her elderly partner, Oswald, were interesting, accomplished people, and threw elegant soirees in their odd but cosy designer hut on a wild coastline. Galliena, apart from her literary leanings, was a prolific painter. Oswald, always startlingly eccentric in his guru-style get-up, was an architect, very web-littered, and an Apple man. All low risk for myself and nothing but social and cultural benefits to be enjoyed. Ha ha ha. But the project ramped up quite quickly. The couple talked about staging it in their recently established bijou cafe in town. Casting was soon being discussed. Who would he get to play the Inquisitor? It's a small talent pool we have here on the peninsula, and nobody was coming to mind. Then it dawned, was it her intention all along? On Galliena, Jim, of course, you must play the Inquisitor. They are your words, and you read them so well. I was seduced, lost again. Intoxicated by the idea, any objections of mine evaporated. With my history, I should have immediately scotched the idea, but that lurking destruction wish of mine that I thought had been snuffed out was taking over again. Galliena thought I had the looks for the part, too. Not very flattering when the character was a crippled, 90-year-old, bitter and cruel ogre of a man. Sure, I can do it. As you say, they are my words, and, thinking of an odd inheritance of a genuine black chasuble from a drunken party, I'd even got the makings of an authentic costume. And so, quite insanely, I started thinking of playing the Inquisitor. I looked up performances on YouTube and soon was mesmerized by that of the venerable knight of the stage, John Gielgud. In the meantime, we decided that Galliena would act Jesus of the Second Coming, an inspired modern choice, and a choice that would make the last act of the Cardinal more palatable, I thought, for me. As the project came closer to delivery, I drafted this poster. The Grand Inquisitor, adapted here by the narrator-actor Jim, produced by Galliena and Oswald. The Grand Inquisitor is a chapter in Fyodor Dostoevsky's great Russian novel, The Brothers Karamazov. In a poetic monologue within the larger novel, one brother describes to another, a priest or mystic in the making, a nihilist view of Christianity. The whole is a cutting satire on modern theology, reflecting Dostoevsky's own views. The idea is that Christ revisits Earth, coming to Spain at the period of the Inquisition. But he is recognized by the Grand Inquisitor and arrested. The cynical old cardinal declares to his prisoner that the world no longer needs Jesus and his impossible religion, because he, the cardinal, can better fulfill mankind's needs by taking away the freedom and giving them his version of God. In the poem, the dueling viewpoints of the Inquisitor reflect Dostoevsky's own doubts about God and religion. The Christ figure, prisoner, here played by Galliena, remains wordless and impassive throughout, until the very last lines when he makes a surprising gesture, a move that throws everything preceding into disarray and doubt. The piece in the original is long, over 8,000 words. My brief was to edit it down to about a quarter of that for a 20-minute performance, and at all costs to keep Dostoevsky's authentic voice. After more than a score of writes and rewrites, I present my piece. The Grand Inquisitor, to be staged at the White Room on the peninsula on so-and-so date. Then the problems erupted. I found that, apart from my inner fears of a botch-up, I could not learn lines, not even those I had sweated into existence myself. I could still trot out my party pieces of school-learned prose and poetry at times, but I just couldn't learn new lines. Let's be kind to me and put it down to age. That should have put the kibosh on the whole enterprise, but it didn't. It would have been such a waste to abandon ship at this juncture. I at least looked the part. I could have been straight from central casting, with my lived-in face, receding hairline, long grey locks, and draped with a hand-embroidered black chasuble. I surely was a real deal old cardinal. My golden pectoral cross, crafted by Galliena, as I said, she was an artist, and starched ruffs were further gilding of the lily. We were a resourceful lot and came up with a solution. I'll expound later. The venue was an easy choice. The couple had opened a small bijou cafe in town and had hosted some poetry readings and such there. It would, with little change, be ideal for staging a playlet. Shortly we were ready for the grand dress rehearsal. Just as we were tugging out, Oswald dropped a bombshell. With Galliena translating, he strongly objected. Verdammt! Was prominent in what he was saying, to a certain action involving his partner towards the end of the performance. I refused to withdraw the offending action, which I saw as absolutely critical. He got very angry. His face flushed crimson red, and his eyes were protruding. He had flecks of spittle around his mouth. he was mad. But then I was too. I shouted at him, "You may have been a good architect, but you know nothing, nada, nix, sweet Fanny Adams about literature or theatre." For him it was to do with jealousy. For me, it was integrity, of course. You had to grant it, though, that he was, beyond a doubt, a passionate man. When such passion meets obduracy, sparks must fly. But, thank goodness, before blows erupted, we achieved an uneasy peace. The show could go on. We saw out the rest of the rehearsal quite well. Very well, considering the format. The stage lights had to be fixed up and solution rehearsed and refined. Those were Oswald's department, and he was very good at it. I buffed up my pectoral cross, trimmed my chasuble, adjusted my alb collars, and brushed my hair. Galliena, a convincing Christ as prisoner, was using makeup to achieve an unwashed, beaten-up look. The posters had been out for a week. Interest had been stirred up. We were looking good. The nerves were definitely at me on opening night, but I had no great anxiety. The risk of a panic attack was distant. Our solution was fulfilling its promise. The White Room began to fill. It looked as if we were going to have a capacity crowd. There were at least 20 people in the cafe, a small but quality audience, including the stars and stalwarts of our poetry society, and an ex-champion plate spinner of Blue Peter fame. I couldn't swear to it, but I think there was a local politician there as well. But sad to relate that in a fishing port town, there were no fishermen. My nemesis, of course, was there, the skeptic. She, the queen bee of our local cultural activities, had been shown the script beforehand and had opined that he was rubbish to speak translated Russian with these and thous. I referred her to John Gielgud's interpretation of the part on YouTube. Normally Anglophilic, she was not impressed, not interested. She didn't like me. We had previous. And she was probably there just to witness a failure. The audience quietened. We took our places on the podium. The play began. Christ, Galliena, wearing a stained prison-like shift, was seated. She was fascinatingly still, impassive, her makeup expertly bleak. The backdrop was a large, fierce, abstract painting by herself. I stumbled a bit over some early lines, but then I got into it. There wasn't much in terms of stage direction for me to remember. I stooped and strode within a small perimeter for a special reason. I clung hard to my staff and appropriately fumed and fulminated as my lines demanded. Expertly, so I thought, modulating my delivery. Acting. Sir John was playing in parallel step deep within my psyche. It wasn't so hard for me playing an old, dreadful curmudgeon. Some would say it was a completely natural role for me. Bastards. Whichever, the solution, to be revealed shortly, was working a treat. And concentrating on it took the terror from me out of the situation. It did fail just once, but I somehow ad-libbed and nobody noticed. And so our playlet, The Grand Inquisitor, came to an end. The monstrous cardinal finished his soliloquy. "Know that I fear thee not. Know that I too have been in the wilderness I too have lived on roots and locusts. I too prize the freedom with which thou hast blessed men, and I too was striving to stand among thy elect, among thy strong and powerful. But I awakened and would not serve madness. I turned back and joined the ranks of those who have corrected thy work. What I say to thee will come to pass, and our dominion will be built up. I repeat, tomorrow thou shalt see that obedient flock, who at a sign from me will hasten to heap up the faggots on which I shall burn thee. For if anyone has ever deserved our fires, it is thou who hast come to hinder us. Tomorrow I shall burn thee. I have spoken. Take him away. Stage direction should come in here. Christ stands up, approaches the bent form of the old cardinal, places her hands on his shoulders, straightens him up, and kisses him firmly, warmly on the mouth. The cardinal collapses, muttering incoherently. The prisoner is led away. The end. Now, revelations. The kiss, here above described, was the sticking point, the source of the epic row between Oswald and I. They had allowed me to think that it would take place, but at the last moment, at the dress rehearsal, he drew his line in the sand. Translated, "You will not kiss Galliena on the mouth. No, no, no. Only on the forehead." He didn't speak much English, and I had little German, but I had enough to know I was really being insulted. His furious jealousy was white hot. Normally, I have a short fuse myself, and would have lashed out and flounced off at this stage with something like, "Stick your bloody play." But no, surprisingly no. There was no question of hitting him. My gallantry kicked in. He was too old, perhaps 10 years older than I, in his 80s, and I was in rude good health and physical shape. No, I wouldn't hit him. Despite his daily wild swimming, he was a frail man in my eyes, and ultimately, I had to face it. I liked the man. I was actually surprised to realise there was little chance of my walking out. I guess I had invested too much time and energy already, and there was this teasing thought, isn't it quite amazing? Two elderly men at passionate loggerheads over acting out a kiss on the stage. I was also flattered at being thought of as a rival for the fair Galliena. She was indeed an attractive woman, but I harboured no designs on her romantically, that I was conscious of. Art for art's sake and all that. But I was not going to be without my kiss. It had to take place, and it had to be full on the lips. Otherwise, dear Fyodor might turn in his grave. Or worse still, Madame Blavatsky, an early enthusiast of poem play, might come back to haunt us. This kiss was never just a kiss, and there was no way around it. Anything less than the on-the-lips kiss would undermine the whole performance. It would be ridiculous. I'd had a few wobblies over thinking about kissing a man in the first casting, but for the rest of the play, I would have done it. But, I got my kiss in the end. But I was short-changed. The kiss was not delivered firmly and warmly. It felt like being kissed by a dead fish. But my ego, whatever, was assuaged as she was under ferocious scrutiny from Oswald, just a few feet away. At least the kiss was on the lips, and thus it served, just about, for the play. I'd had enough, though. It all had left a sour taste. For me, this was the opening and closing performance of this play. In fact, I was finished, period, with this play acting. No more self-delusion. A literary friend offered to do a review. She was diplomatically supportive, but the play would benefit further from a more varied pace and intonation. It needs more pauses to give the audience spaces for digestion time, especially with such dense material. She continued, thinking that there was to be more performances than the opening one, that the delivery should be slower and the more important phrases might be milked more of their meaning. Mostly, she was right. I fell a tad short of Heelgood. No. And there was I thinking I was milking it to Billy-O. But at least there was some satisfaction. My stand on the kiss was vindicated. Galliana's non-verbal gesture of the kiss is central to the whole possibility of transformation and redemption. Such verbal arguments cannot be answered in their own terms. They can only be met and ultimately shifted in a powerful non-verbal gesture. This gesture of the kiss could be even more measured, slower, and changed to a slightly more exaggerated embrace. I don't think so. In the circumstances, I was lucky to get the merest brushing of the lips and not get a dagger in my back. Finally, the iPad and our solution. I couldn't memorize my lines, so I needed a full-on prompter, preferably in such a confined space, a silent, automatically scrolling one. Oswald put forward the idea of the iPad as prompter. After much experimentation and practice, we found one that suited me best. The speed of the scrolling was absolutely critical and delicate, but we got it mostly right. The size of letters was an issue also, as I'm short-sighted, normally needing reading glasses, and glasses were out. That's why stooping was so necessary, but luckily also in character. We had the iPad on a table beside the prisoner. It was hidden from view behind some thick volumes of leather-bound books. My first edition of Fascinating was part of the camouflage. I knew it would come in useful someday. I never did get around to reading it. The whole worked so well that nobody, not even the reviewer, was aware of the scrolling prompt. I made impressions that night, some even good. I was offered a part as a priest. Oh God, typecast already in a short film called Maya. It went on to some acclaim. I went on to the cutting room floor. The Queen Bee asked me to audition for a part in a play she was developing. The part was that of a drunken oaf who was also a sexual predator and abuser. She probably wrote the character especially for me, a spurned woman's revenge. I declined. There was a break-up with the German couple afterwards. A formal, rather lofty letter was hand-delivered. I've misplaced it, but basically it said, in stilted English, my weak coaching, that I should never darken their doors again. It saddened me a bit, but divorce was inevitable after the play. I wondered if my abrupt dismissal had anything to do with what I'd heard, that Galliana and Oswald were already planning their next play, Waiting for Godot. I loved that play, having first seen it in my hair oil days at a Beckett exhibition in Reading University. I could have managed the part of the boy, absurd at my age, but precisely absurd. No iPad needed. Only 2 lines. It rankled me that I hadn't at least been asked to be involved. My German ex-friends were achieving their cultural goals, and good luck to them. I consigned myself to ever being in the audience, Olivia's black hole, no more mad self-delusion. One consolation is that my son co-founded our local Peninsula Players and is a very good actor and director. Another minor consolation is that I'm not alone locally in my inability to learn lines. A gifted cineast and actor wannabe was drafted some years ago into a locally produced Dario Fo play. My son engineered that his comic performance could be a pop-up one. He popped up and down in a large cardboard box on the table, reading his lines pasted on the inside. He was brilliant. Brought the flippin' house down. An iPad could have helped them, but nobody had one then. I've learned my lesson. No more fatal compulsion to act. But I'm glad I had a crack at it and will be forever grateful to the iPad for allowing me to experience a few moments in the limelight. I am now within the Apple fold, and it is good, I think. I've created a channel on YouTube and put up some videos. I have had over 100,000 views. My son tells me that this is success, and the fact that I achieved over 1,000 subscribers means I can monetize the channel. I have some ideas cooking on how to turn my scores of written stories into videos. But it all feels a bit tawdry, shallow. These terms, this success, is as nothing to the pleasure of that first published book. I was the publisher, you see, arriving from the printers. I guess, ultimately, I'm too old for this sort of thing. I was shaped in a different world. I am fated to continue to construct memoirs and stories in the conventional way, and perhaps not getting published. But I probably will also persevere with YouTube for immortality's sake. Nota bene, I'm sorry to relate that the real character, called Oswald here, passed away in 2020. He lost a valiant fight with cancer. He was an intelligent, passionate character, a one-off eccentric, and an accomplished man in so many ways. I'm happy to have known him and glad we drew back in that confrontation from the brink of exchanging blows. But sad to relate that, IT genius that he may have been, there is no mention of him online, not even a glimmer on YouTube. Did he miss or deliberately pass on immortality? Sinne well.